Origin and Meaning of Irish Family Names by John O'Donovan. When they were formed. Dr. Keating and his contemporary Gratianus Lucius have asserted on the authority of the ancient Irish manuscripts that family names or surnames first became hereditary in Ireland in the reign of Brian Boru in the beginning of the 11th century. He, King Brian, was the first that ordained that a certain surname should be imposed on every tribe in order that it might be the more easily known from what stock each family was derived. For previous to his time, surnames were unfixed and were discoverable only by tracing a long line of ancestors. This assertion has been repeated by all the subsequent Irish writers, but none of them has attempted either to question or prove it. It seems, however, generally true, and also that in the formation of surnames at this period, the several families adopted the names of their fathers or grandfathers. It would appear, however, from some pedigrees of acknowledged authenticity, that a few instances the surnames were assumed from remoter ancestors, as in the families of the O'Dowds and the O'Kevins in Tirera, in which the chiefs from whom the names were taken were contemporary with St. Gerald of Mayo, who flourished in the 7th century, and in the family of O'Neill, who took their surname from Neil Glundulf, monarch of Ireland, who was killed by the Danes in the year 919. It is obvious also from the authentic Irish annals that there are many Irish surnames now in use which were called after ancestors who flourished long subsequent to the reign of Brian. But it is a fact that the greater number of the more distinguished Irish family names were assumed from ancestors who were contemporary with this monarch. And though we have as yet discovered no older authority than Dr. Keating for showing that surnames were first established in Ireland in his time, I am satisfied that authorities which would prove it existed in the time of Keating, for that writer, though a very injudicious critic, was nevertheless a faithful compiler. Until, however, we discover a genuine copy of the edict published by the monarch, Brian, commanding that the surnames to be borne should be taken from the chieftains who flourished in his own time, if such edict were ever promulgated, we must be content to relinquish the prospect of a final decision of the question. At the same time, it must be conceded that the evidence furnished by the authentic annals and pedigrees in behalf of it may in themselves be regarded as almost sufficient to settle the question. It appears then from the most authentic annals and pedigrees that the O'Briens of Thomond took their name from the monarch Brian Boru himself, who was killed in the Battle of Clontarf in the year 1014, and that family names were formed either from the names of the chieftains who fought in that battle or from those of their sons or fathers. Thus, the O'Mahaneys of Desmond are named from Mahon, the son of Cian, king of Desmond, who fought in this battle. The O'Donohues from Donagh, whose father, Donal, was the second in command over the Eugenian forces in the same battle. The O'Donovans from Donovan, whose son, Cathal, commanded the Hugh Carbery in the same battle. The O'Duggans of Fermoy from Duggan, whose son, Gevanna, commanded the race of the Druid Morroch in the same battle. The O'Phalans or Phelans of the Daishis from Phalon, whose son, Motlach, commanded the Daisha of Munster in the same memorable battle, as were the MacMurrows of Leinster from Murrow, whose son, Melmorda, king of Leinster, assisted the Danes against the Irish monarchy. The McCarthys of Desmond are named from Carhoch, the son of Ser Vrachach, who is mentioned in the Irish annals as having fought the Battle of Melkenny on the River Suir in the year 1493. The O'Connors of Connacht from Connor or Conover, who died in the year 971. The O'Melaghlins of Meath, the chiefs of the southern O'Neill race from Melshachlin or Malachy II, monarch of Ireland, who died in the year 1022. The McGillipatricks or Fitzpatricks of Ossory from Gillipatrick, chief of Ossory, who was killed in the year 955, etc., etc. From these and other evidences furnished by the Irish annals, it appears certain then that the most distinguished surnames in Ireland were taken from the names of progenitors who flourished in the 10th or beginning of the 11th century. But there are instances to be met with of surnames which had been established in the 10th century having been changed to others which were called after progenitors who flourished at a later period, such as O'Mulroney of Moylurg to MacDermot, and O'Loughlin, head of the Northern O'Neill, to MacLachlan. There are also instances of minor branches of great families having changed the original prefix of O to Mac and Mac O or Mac E when they had acquired new territories and became independent families, as O'Brien to Mackie Brehon and Mac Brehon, in the instances of Mackie Brehon Ara, Mac Brehon Cúna, Mac Brehon Aherla, all offshoots from the great family of Thomond, and O'Neill to Mackie Neil Boy, in the instance of the branch of the great Tyrone family, which settled in the 14th century eastwards of the River Bann in the counties of Down and Antrim. This is all that we know of the origin of Irish surnames. Sir James Ware agrees with Keating and Gratianus Lucius that surnames became hereditary in Ireland in the 10th or beginning of the 11th century, and adds that they became hereditary in England and France about the same period. How they are formed. Irish family names or surnames, then, are formed from the genitive case of names of ancestors who flourished in the 10th century and at later periods by prefixing O or Mac, as O'Neill or McCarthy, etc. O literally signifies grandson, in which sense it is still spoken in the province of Ulster, and in a more enlarged sense, any male descendant, like the Latin nepes, and Mac literally signifies son, and in a more extended sense, any male descendant. The former word is translated nepos by all the writers of Irish history in the Latin language, from Adamhuan to Dr. O'Connor, and the latter filius, from which it is clear that it is synonymous with the Welsh prefix map and with the Anglo-Norman fitz, which Horn Torque has proved to be a corruption of the Latin filius. Geraldus Cambrensis Latinizes the name of the King of Leinster, Dermot McMurrough, Dermitius Merchadides, from which it may be clearly perceived that he regarded the prefix Mac as equivalent to the Greek patronymic termination ides. The only difference, therefore, to be observed between O and Mac in surnames is that the family who took the prefix of Mac called themselves after their father, and those who took the prefix O formed their surnames from their grandfather. Ni, meaning daughter, was always prefixed to names of women, as O and Mac meant male descendants, but this usage is now obsolete. A most extraordinary instance of this mode of forming names occurred in our own time in Connacht, where John McGagan, Esquire of Bunowan Castle in the west of the county of Galway, applied to His Majesty King George IV for license to reject the name which his ancestors had borne for 800 years from their ancestor, Johan, chief of Kinelfiacha, in the now county of Westmeath, in the 10th century, and to take a new name from his more ancient and more illustrious ancestor, Niall of the Nine Hostages, monarch of Ireland in the 4th century. His Majesty granted this license, and the son of John McGagan is now called John Augustus O'Neill, that is John Augustus, descendant of Niall of the Nine Hostages. The other branches of the family of McGagan, however, still retain the surname which was established in the reign of Brian Boru as the distinguishing appellation of the race of Fiacha, the son of Niall of the Nine Hostages, and the ancestor from whom the McGagans had taken their tribal name. From the similarity and almost complete identity of the meanings affixed to the words O and Mac in surnames, it might be expected that they should be popularly considered as conferring each the same respectability on the bearer. Yet, this is far from being the case. For it is popularly believed in every part of Ireland that the prefix O was a kind of title among the Irish, while Mac is a mark of no distinction whatever, and that any common Irishman may bear the prefix Mac, while he must have some claims to gentility of birth before he can prefix O to his name. This is generally the feeling in the province of Connacht, where the gentry of Milesian descent are called O'Connor, O'Flaherty, O'Malley, etc., and the peasantry, their collateral relatives, Connor, Flaherty, Malley. All this, however, is a popular error, for the prefix O is in no wise whatever more respectable than Mac, nor is either one or the other an index to any respectability whatever, inasmuch as every single family of Fir Bolgic, Milesian, or Danish origin in Ireland is entitled to bear either O or Mac as the first part of their surname. It is popularly known that O'Neill was king of Ulster and O'Connor king of Connacht, and hence it is assumed that the prefix O is a title of great distinction, that O'Hallion was the name of an Irish Giochach or beggar who murdered O'Mulloy of Fiarachal in the year 1110, or that McCarthy was king of Desmond, or that McMurrough was king of Leinster. It is therefore a positive fact that the prefixes O and Mac are of equal import, both meaning male descendant, and that neither is an indication of any respectability whatever, except where the pedigree is proved and the history of the family is known. To illustrate this by an example, the O prefix to my own name is an index of my descent from Donovan, the son of Cahill, chief of the Hufiganti, who was killed by Brian Boru in the year 997. But the Mac prefixed in the name McCarthy is an indication of a higher descent, namely from Carhach, the great-grandson of Callahan Cashel, king of Munster, whose descendants held the highest rank in Desmond till the civil wars of 1641. It would be now difficult to show how this popular error originated, as the meanings of the two prefixes O and Mac are so nearly alike. It may, however, have originated in a custom which prevailed among the ancient Irish, namely that for some reason which we cannot now discover, the O was never prefixed in any surname derived from art, trade, or science. O'Gowan is the only exception. The prefix Mac having been always used in such instances, for we never meet an O'Sair or an O'Bard, and surnames thus formed, of course, never ranked as high among the Irish as those which were formed from the names of chieftains. It may be here also remarked that the O was never prefixed to names beginning with the word Giulla. I see no reason for this either, but I am positive that it is a fact, for throughout the annals of the Four Masters, only one O'Giulla, namely O'Giulla Faldric, occurs, and that only in one instance. I have no doubt that this is a mere error of transcription. Another strange error prevails in the north of Ireland respecting O and Mac, vis-a-vis that every name in the north of Ireland of which Mac forms the first part is of Scotch origin, while those to which the O is prefixed are of Irish origin. For example, that of O'Neill or O'Kane is of Irish origin, but MacLachlan and McCluskey of Scotch origin. But it happens in these instances that MacLachlan is the senior branch of the family of O'Neill, and McCluskey a most distinguished offshoot from that of O'Kane. This error had its origin in the fact that the Scotch families very rarely prefixed the O, there being only 3 instances of their having used it at all on record, while the Irish used O 10-fold more than the Mac. This appears from an index to the genealogical books of Lecan and of Donald MacFirdibus in the manuscript library of the Royal Irish Academy, in which mention is made of only 3 Scotch surnames beginning with O, while there are upwards of 2,000 distinct Irish surnames beginning with O and only 200 beginning with Mac. Another strange error is popular among the Irish and those not of the lowest class, namely that only 5 Irish families are entitled to have the O prefixed. But what names those 5 are is by no means agreed upon. Some asserting that they are O'Neill, O'Donnell, O'Connor, O'Brien, and O'Flaherty. Others that they are O'Neill, O'Donnell, O'Kane, O'Dowd, and O'Kelly. A third party insisting that they are O'Brien, O'Sullivan, O'Connell, O'Mahony, and O'Driscoll, while others make up the list in quite a different manner from all of these, and this according to the part of Ireland in which they are located. And each party is positive that no family but the 5 in their own list has any title to the O. None of them would acknowledge that even the O'Melaghlins, the heads of the Southern O'Neill race, have any claims to the prefix, nor other very distinguished families who invariably bore it down to a comparatively late period. On the other hand, it is universally admitted that any Irish family from McCarthy and McMurrough down to McGuckin and McFaudine has full title to the prefix Mac, and for no other reason than because it is believed to have been a mark of no distinction whatever among the Irish. This error originated in the fact that 5 families of Irish blood were accepted by the English laws from being held as mere Irishmen. But of this more later. There is another error prevalent among the Irish gentry of Milesian blood in Ireland, which is less to be excused as they have ample opportunities of correcting it. Namely, that the chief or head of the family only was entitled to have the O prefix to his name. This is the grossest error of all, for there is not a single passage in the authentic annals or genealogical books which even suggests that such a custom ever existed amongst the ancient Irish chieftain families. For it is an indubitable fact that every member of the family had the O prefixed to his surname, as well as the chief himself. But a distinction was made between the chief and the members of his family in the following manner. In all official documents, the chief used the surname only, as O'Neill, O'Donnell, etc. In conversation, also the surname only was used, but the definite article was frequently prefixed as the O'Neill, the O'Brien. While in annals and other historical documents in which it was found necessary to distinguish a chief from his predecessors or successors, the chief of a family was designated by giving him the family name first and the Christian or baptism name after it in parentheses. But the different members of the chief's family had their Christian names always prefixed, as at the present day. I have thus dwelt upon the errors respecting surnames in Ireland from an anxious wish that they should be removed, and I trust that it will be believed henceforth that the Mac in Irish surnames is fully as respectable as the O, and that instead of 5, there are at least 2,000 Irish families who have full title to have the O prefixed to their surnames. Having spoken of the origin of surnames in Ireland and of the popular errors now prevailing respecting them, I shall next proceed to notice certain epithets, sobriquets, etc., by which the Irish chieftains and others of inferior rank were distinguished. Besides the surnames or hereditary family names, which the Irish people assumed from their ancestors, it appears from the authentic annals that most, if not all, of their chieftains had attached to their Christian names, and sometimes to their surnames, certain cognomens by which they were distinguished from each other. These cognomens, or as they may in many instances be called sobriquets, were given them from some perfection or imperfection of the body, or some disposition or quality of the mind, from the place of birth or the place of fosterage, and frequently from the place of their deaths. Of the greater number of these cognomens, The pedigree of the regal family of O'Neill furnishes examples as Niall Rowe, that is Niall the Red, who flourished about the year 1225, so called from his having red hair. Hugh Toynlask, a name which requires no explanation, who died in 1230. I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. I need an explanation. Toynlask, Toynlask, who died in 1230. Focus. Niall Moore, that is Niall the Great, who died in 1397. Con Bachach, that is Con the Lame, who was created Earl of Tyrone in 1542. Among the same family, we meet Henry Avery, that is Henry the Contentious. Shane on Demus, which is Shane the Proud. Of the cognomens derived from the places in which and the families by whom they were fostered, the pedigrees of the same family afford several instances, as Turlough Luneach, so called from his having been fostered by O'Looney, chief of Munterlooney in Tyrone; Niall Conalach, so called from his having been fostered by O'Donnell, chief of Tyrconnell; Shane Donaloch, so called from his having been fostered by O'Donnelly, according to the Annals of the Four Masters in 1531 and 1567; and Phelim Devlinach, chief Minster Devlin, near Lough Neagh, the present county of Derry. Various examples of cognomens given to chieftains from the place or territory in which they were fostered are to be met with in other families, as in that of O'Brien, Donnacarbra, who was so called from his having been fostered by O'Donovan, chief of Carberry Ava, the ancient name of the plains of the county of Limerick. In the regal family of MacMurrough of Leinster, Donald Kavanagh was so called from having been fostered by the Corb of St. Cavan at Kilcavan near Gorey in Houday or O'Day in the present county of Wexford. This cognomen of O'Donnell has been adopted for the last 2 centuries as a surname by his descendants, a thing very unusual among Irish families. In the family of MacDonald of Scotland, John Cahanach was so called from his having been fostered by O'Cahan or O'Kane in the present county of Derry. In the pedigrees of other families, various instances are on record of cognomens having been applied by posterity to chieftains from the place of their deaths. In the family of O'Neill, for example, Brian Caha on Doon, or of the Battle of Down, was so called by posterity from his having been killed in a battle fought at Downpatrick in the year 1260. In the family of O'Brien, Conana Shudine, from the wood of Shudan in Burren, in which he was killed in the year 1267, and in the family of McCarthy, the celebrated Finian Rian Rowan, from his having been killed at the castle of Rin Rowan in the year 1261, after a brilliant career of victory over the English. On this subject of cognomens and sobriquets among the Irish, Sir Henry Peers wrote as follows in the year 1682, in a description of the county of Westmeath, written in the form of a letter to Anthony, Lord Bishop of Meath, and published in the first volume of Mullany's Collectanea. Quote, every Irish surname or family name hath either O or Max prefixed, concerning which I have found some make this observation, but I dare not undertake that it shall hold universally true. That such as have O prefixed were of old superior lords or princes, as O'Neill, O'Donnell, O'Melaghlin, etc., and such as have Mac were only great men, vis-a-vis lords, thanes, as McGuinness, McLaughlin, McDonogh, etc. But however this observation may hold, it is certain that they take much liberty and seem to do it with delight in giving of nicknames. And if a man have any imperfection or evil habit, he shall be sure to hear of it in the nickname. Thus, if he be blind, lame, squint-eyed, grey-eyed, be a stammerer in speech, be left-handed, to be sure he shall have one of these added to his name, So also from the color of his hair, as black, red, yellow, brown, and from his age, as young, old, or from what he addicts himself to, or much delights in, as in dra- as in draining, building, fencing, or the like, so that no man whatever can escape a nickname who lives among them or converseth with them. And sometimes so libidinous are they in this kind of raillery, they will give nicknames for antiphrasism or contrariety of speech. Thus, a man of excellent parts and beloved of all men shall be called grana, that is, naughty, or fit to be complained of. If a man have a beautiful countenance or lovely eyes, they call him queer, that is, squint eyed. If a great housekeeper, he shall be called acarissach, that is, greedy. End quote. In the 14th and 15th centuries, when the Irish family names increased and their territories were divided into two and three parts among rival chieftains of the same family, each of the chieftains adopted some addition for the sake of distinction. Thus, among the O'Connors of Connacht, we find O'Connor Don, that is, O'Connor the brown haired, and O'Connor Roe, or the red haired. This distinction was first made in the year 1384 when Torlock Don and Torlock Roe, who had both been for some time in emulation for the chieftainship of the territory of Shilmurray, agreed to have it equally divided between them, on which occasion the former was to be called O'Connor Don and the latter O'Connor Roe. It is now supposed by many of the Irish that the epithet Don, postfixed to the name of the chief of the O'Connors, is a Spanish title, while those who are acquainted with the history of the name think that we should reject it as being a useless sobriquet, and more particularly now, as there is no O'Connor Roe from whom he needs to be distinguished. It is true that the O'Connor Don might now very lawfully be called the O'Connor, as there is no O'Connor Roe or O'Connor Sligo, at least none who can take the name, but as he had borne it before O'Connor Roe disappeared, we would not advise it to be rejected for another generation, as we think that an O'Connor Roe will, in the meantime, make his appearance, for we are acquainted with an individual of that name who knows his pedigree well, but is not sufficiently wealthy to put himself forward as an Irish chieftain. In the same province, we find the MacDermots of Moylurg divided into three distinct families, the head of whom was par excellence styled the MacDermot, and the other two who were tributary to him called the one MacDermot Roe, that is the red, and the other MacDermot Gal, or the anglicized. In Thomond, we find the McNamara's split into two distinct families, distinguished by the names of McNamara Finn, that is the fair, and McNamara Reich, or the swarthy. In Desmond, the family of McCarthy split into three powerful branches known by the names of McCarthy Moore, or the Great, McCarthy Reich, or the Swarthy, and McCarthy Muscriach, or of Muskery. Beaufort asserts with his usual confidence that the McCarthy Reich signifies McCarthy the King, but this is utterly fallacious, for the epithet, which is anglicized Reich, is written Riach or Riavach in the original annals of Inishfallen and of the Four Masters, and translates Fuscus by Philip O'Sullivan Biar, who knew the import of it far better than Beaufort, in his History of the Irish Catholics, published at Lisbon in 1621. The O'Sullivan split into the families of O'Sullivan Moore and O'Sullivan Biar, the O'Donovans into those of O'Donovan Moore and O'Donovan Lochacroft, and O'Hay O'Donovan, the O'Kennedys of Ormond into those of O'Kennedy Finn, O'Kennedy Roe, and O'Kennedy Don, the O'Farrells of Annally into those of O'Farrell Bain, or Bon, that is the white, and O'Farrell Boy, or the yellow, etc.